Hello and welcome to Risk and Reward. In this episode, I sit down with Brando Vásquez, who works on brand and design at 1X Technologies, the company behind Neo, one of the first humanoid robots designed for the home. We get into how these machines actually learn, why safety had to come before AI, and why this revolution might force us to confront a much bigger question about the purpose of life. The conversation actually starts with us reacting to news from Jack Dorsey. Typically, I'd cut this, but Brando makes an astute observation, which I felt was worth including. If you enjoy this episode, do consider subscribing on YouTube. I intend to have more conversations with people building on the edge of tech, AI, and design. And if you want to go even deeper, I'm going to be publishing all my research for free on Substack, which you'll find via a link in the description. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So it was a big day yesterday. I thought about messaging you and saying, hey, let's put this on hold. But at the same time, you've got to just
Yeah,
rally.
I mean, it is interesting because the stock jumped, what, 20%, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
what's really interesting here is that it just signals to the market and to the world that this is good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the materialistic signal is that this was a good move on Jack's part and that other leaders should do the same, should follow suit. And so if you think about it, like the chain reaction that could start with this could be the start of something really interesting. We're right now at the beginning of an industrial revolution of some sorts, right? Like we didn't live through
Absolutely.
the first one. We're now going through the second one, the actual second one. Because the internet, I feel like it was like a soft revolution of some sorts. Like sure, we
Mhm.
digitized some stuff, companies changed in the way that they operated, but it wasn't like we have industrialized supply chains and we have like, I don't know, this steam engine. But I think now we're going through that. And it's crazy
And
to see how
and
everything's starting to fall into place.
I mean, obviously, like I'm still working on the software side. You're working on these more real world implications of it all. I've got some questions on that. We'll get to it. But let me just start with this. Obviously, since we last spoke, the Neo came out.
My name is Bernd, and today we're launching Neo, our humanoid for the home.
It like probably the biggest thing on the internet for a while. Like I think I've read some data that this like thing basically broke the internet. And in large part through to your efforts, I'm sure, as along with a bunch of other people at the company. But obviously, whenever you release something of that scale, it's going to come with mixed opinions, and there was both positives and negatives from it. So let's start there. Maybe tell me like what was the internal dialogue like after it all happened, and like how did people respond internally to both the positives and the criticisms?
Right. So one can only hope to work on a project like this hopefully once in a lifetime, right? So I feel so thankful, and it's to some degree it's so surreal to be able to work on something like this. But I feel like everybody in the team felt like it didn't really matter what everybody else said, because we knew it came from a place of actual love and genuine hope for humanity. And I know that sounds so cliche. In most cases, it is. Like if you're building B2B SaaS and you're saying, well, we care about humanity, it will sound totally disconnected. But when you're actually launching a humanoid robot that might have societal and political implications at scale, you have to care about humanity, right? And so we deeply care about humanity. I mean, it's safe. We wanted to make sure that it was treated as a piece of art, almost like an art project, and so people could read into it and interpret it their own way. And honestly, the reaction was it overwhelmed us because it was, first of all, mostly positive. I wouldn't say like 100%, of course not. It was probably like 80, 70, 80% positive. And people were having fun with it. I think the design was just so simple and so approachable and almost like so, I don't know, friendly to like a ridiculous degree, because all of the other robots look like killing machines. Suddenly you see like a Neo that's just like soft and, just like a friend that you want to have around. It's like a nice plushy toy.
Let me dig into that a little bit. I think one criticism of these things is that I think one thing that they suffer from like a public perception perspective is that they're all very polished. So the way I would articulate it is they're kind of like a supermodel in that they look very beautiful. Is there much going on inside, right? Like, and so there's maybe a bit of a disconnect there between what these things are capable of right now, like versus their form factor, which like looks like a a very polished product. And I think one question I had for you was like from the moment you joined the company to today, what is some of the things that you've seen, like how this thing has like exponentially got better?
It's incredible. Like it felt like an early prototype. of sorts. As time went by, I think what we discovered was that shooting these videos were it was a very clear way to communicate a product roadmap, because a demo that's that high fidelity and that visionary, like, hey Neo, give the girl the backpack and then give her a hug. It communicates, it shows like everybody else in the company, all of the engineers, it tells them, hey, this is what needs to happen, right? This is exactly what Neo should be capable of doing every single time without failure. And so what we discovered was that through these videos, it was like an external communication tactic, but it was also an internal communication tactic. And so the engineers were working harder because they could visualize it. It was so clear now. Before, if you split a product as complex as Neo into 200 PRDs, people are going to lose like the north. But if you create a video that's so clear that it shows not only the functionality of the product, but the spirit of the product, everybody else will work pretty much in tandem towards that goal. And so that changed a lot. The technology changed a lot. Neo now can, perform essentially almost every single task that you tell him. Of course, the dexterity in the hands is still one of the biggest bottlenecks. I know Elon, in an interview, he said, the hardest thing really about the robot is the hands, and nobody has solved it yet, like perfectly.
Human hands are evolved to be this incredibly sophisticated machine. Think of all the things you can do with your hands, which is a lot.
I can think of many things.
Swing a baseball bat, you can thread needles, play the piano with violin. The hands are incredibly versatile instruments. The human hand is something like, depending on how you count it, 27 or 28 degrees of freedom. It's amazing.
Once we solve that, that's going to unlock like a ton of like functionality and a new universe of real like industrial machinery and industrial complexity. But to answer your question, I mean, the robot went from a very early prototype to a fully fleshed out product. And now the challenge is to produce it at scale, right? We have the product, we have it, defined. It's a really cool product. People love it. But now we need to ship tens of thousands of units. So now the challenge is in scaling it and making sure that the product is reliable at scale.
Speaking of tens of thousands of units, I noticed that your investor kind of announced that you guys had built relationships with their investment portfolio, and that there was going to be like a more industrial rollout among the portfolio companies as a way to kind of distribute. By the time you guys roll out for the company portfolio, do you think at that point that will still be a learning, like for the development of the robot versus it being more autonomous at that point?
No, it's hard. It's hard to really, well, I cannot really predict the future and tell you like, this is when we're going to hit like 100% autonomy. So
Right.
It's really hard I cannot give you like an estimate or anything like that. But what I can tell you about world model is that, we talked about the progress with hardware from Neo being, just like giving its first steps to like being able to fully clean your house in like something like 18 months. The thing with the world model and the AI inside of Neo Redwood, it's something very similar is happening, where at the very beginning it was very, how can I explain this? I think like in a high level, AI is advancing so quickly that it trickles down. So the advancement of like the entire AI space and the progress of AI in general is also helping us make progress faster. And since everybody is on the same race, like everybody wants, better inference cost, faster inference, like more optimized compute, and we are one of the big players there, then we are really like profiting from everybody else working on this. So it's pretty cool. And I think the industry is paying attention, like other industries, other verticals, even other countries are paying attention. So EQT said, yeah, we want to commit to a commercial deal and we want to have, I believe, 10,000 NEOs. And I'm sure more of those commercial partnerships are going to start popping up because it just makes so much sense. I mean, when you have a robot that can do anything for you, you can optimize so many things, from manual labor to just jobs that humans should not be doing in the first place, right? Like dangerous jobs or jobs that might cause a lot of stress. So I think the entire world is paying attention. Robotics is definitely one of the handful of industries that's definitely like the entire world is on the world stage, right? It's AI, robotics, and then maybe, resources, defense. And it's because the potential is just endless. So yeah, I mean, autonomy is going to come by, it's improving every day because AI is improving every day. And, commercial partnerships are going to keep coming up because the use cases are just so obvious and so profitable for everybody involved.
Speaking of the different models, and I apologize to bring this up, but it's interesting. So obviously, Figure's founder has been quite critical at times around the different model or different ways that people are approaching this.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on your approach to this with World Model versus I think they have a model where they have like a self-reinforcing like learning loop among the different robots, and like maybe give an explanation of how World Model actually works. Like how is the video, like how is the video created that the robots are learning from today?
Yeah. So I cannot speak for whatever Brett Adcock is doing. I don't really know him. I don't know much about him. Me personally, I don't like the vision for, for whatever he's doing. The robots feel very cold, very industrial. I wouldn't have them in my house. Most people I know wouldn't have them either. But what I can tell you about World Model and the difference between what we're doing and other people are doing is that it's really very, very simple.
How it works is you give Neo a prompt with voice or text. Once you prompt Neo, it'll take what it sees as input to generate a visualization of how to complete the request. You can either have Neo automatically execute the generation or choose the best one to run from among several parallel generations. While Neo has never seen these objects before, there are still some examples of pick-and-place tasks in our dataset. With the World Model, Neo can perform any task with any object, whether there is existing data or not. Not only has Neo never seen his toilet, but it has never performed a task anywhere near similar. Without any prior data on how to operate a toilet seat, the transfer of human knowledge becomes a lot more apparent.
What we have created is we built a model that in order for Neo to perform tasks in the physical world, Neo has to understand the physical world. What does that mean? Neo has to understand the optics of the physical world, like the material stuff that's around us, and then he has to understand the physics of the physical world. So if he manipulates something or if he touches anything, if he interfaces with the physical world, then what happens next? So the model that we built actually does both. And the way that it works is actually pretty simple. Neo hallucinates based on a task, on a prompt that you give to Neo, hallucinates multiple scenarios, potential future scenarios, and then assesses which one of them has the highest likelihood of success, chooses that one, and then performs the action. And the result, there is a reward function that tells Neo whether he should do more of those and reinforce, let's call it that train of thought, to choose scenarios in that particular way, in the way that he did it. Or if it's not successful, it will change the weights in the model. So to tell him, you should not choose these types of hallucinations in the future. So it's very simple. Generate hallucinations, tries the one with the highest likelihood of success, performs the action. If it's successful, there is a reward function that reinforces that, make sure that happens more and more. And if it's not successful, the opposite happens. The cool thing about Neo, though, is that you can do this in multiple ways. Neo can do this autonomously, or you can do it on a laptop. So we have an interface that's really cool where you can just tell Neo, give a prompt to Neo, multiple screens show up, and you can choose one of them of the hallucinations, and then Neo can perform the action. And so it's very interactive. It's almost like playing a video game in essence. And it's it's cool.
How long is this feedback loop? Like if you left it to do its own thing, would it take a while for it to complete a task, or is it relatively quick?
It's super quick. It's like seconds. It's very, very quick.
And then once it picks up an action, does it then feed it into like a centralized brain, or is it still very much like contained like locally within a distinct robot?
No, so the model learns from all Neos. So that's exactly the idea, right? Is that if we deploy 10,000 Neos to homes and then we deploy 10,000 more, every single Neo will get better. And that's the awesome part about this, right? Is that all Neos learn from each other. And so the more Neos are out there, the smarter they are, the better they can perform the actions. And the whole point of Neo being safe, which no other robot is for humans, is that we can deploy as many as possible and we can rest assured, sleep soundly, be calm and just know that, we can live with them. We can coexist with those robots, because this really is fundamentally a question of coexistence. We are not talking about a car or an inanimate object. To some degree, this is the first industrial machine that is animated, almost like having a soul, right? It can act autonomously. It can do things autonomously. So if the foundation is not safety, then it's not good for us. So safety really is the core issue.
Neo decides to take a very heavy piece of wood, like the top of a table, and drop it on me when I'm sleeping.
Neo will not be able to, or allowed to, it's physically capable of, but it will not be allowed to pick up something that is that heavy.
I think in terms of world model and AI, progress will be made very, very quickly, as it has been happening for the past, 3 to 5 years. We think that we're like ahead of everybody else in the space. But the interesting part is when you put like autonomy and safety together. Because if you have autonomy and danger, then it's a problem, right? But if you have autonomy and safety, then we're all good. We can enjoy this new technology. Imagine if your phones were like razor sharp. That's kind of the analogy, right?
I was going to ask about that actually, because obviously in a lot of your collateral, which is very beautiful, but it almost, they look kind of Apple-esque in terms, and what I mean by that is just the kind of simplicity of the environments. I guess like one criticism might be that in reality, your dogs are bouncing off the walls, your kids running around with toys and this, that, and the other. And I know like there's a difference between like just showing something for demonstration purposes in real life. But that's where I think, interestingly, like safety comes into play, because if you depict a child running through an environment or, dogs playing or whatever it may be, I think that's when Neo really comes into its own. But one question I had about that actually is, because really the race is around getting to safety and autonomy, and that this can be demonstrated through artificial environments to some degree or through learning models as you have with World Model. Is the form factor somewhat of like, is it even important right now? Could you perform tasks in isolation or simulate them, and then once you have the capabilities, then concentrate on the hardware? And the reason I ask that is because I'm wondering if like once these models like hit a critical point, are we going to see an influx of players like building hardware to just plug in like the brain? Or do you think that the development of the actual robot itself is of equal importance?
I think it's the most important thing, and it goes back to safety. So what makes Neo, it really, again, it goes back to coexistence with these machines. Why? Because most robots that people claim you can have at home, they're really not safe. And why aren't they safe? Well, it's because their actuators, their motors are unsafe. Like they're way too powerful for being like close to a human. Talk about kids. Like I would never have my kid next to one of our competitors' robots, or even by manual industrial robots. The reason is they're too powerful. I mean, they can just like, if they fail and they move they swing their arm too fast or too strongly, you're gone. You're done for. That goes back to hardware. So the reason why Neo is safe is not just the form factor and the outside and the soft polymer that he's made out of and the suit. It's actually the tendons. It's actually actuators themselves, which are rope actuated. That means that the ropes, in essence, what they're trying to achieve is to emulate our own tendons, right? And what the ropes can do that no other actuator currently can do is that it has enormous strength, but at the threshold, it's much safer for humans. So even if Neo would move his arm and fail like quickly, it would never be too strong to damage you actually as a human. But the tendons are so strong that he can lift heavy objects. So the strength that Neo has is useful for tasks, but it's not dangerous. Conversely, the other robots have their strength that's useful for tasks increases danger. And so that is one of the biggest differences, right? So that's why we are built Neo first to be like 100% safe robot with the tendon drive, with the soft covers, and then you build the AI. If you first build the AI and you try to then build a safe robot, I think you're starting from the wrong premise. I think you're optimizing for the wrong thing. And again, it goes back to the values of the company. The reason why we invest so much in these videos and we find these beautiful houses is because we care about beauty. And I think people can tell, right? Just like how, Steve Jobs cared a lot about beauty, everybody could tell. everybody liked it, and and that's what attracts people to Apple. And that's what made Apple, company number one in the world for so long. It's because they created the right thing. And I think in our cases, we care about beauty, we care about safety, and that goes first. If we would care just about money, then we would be like, yeah, sure, doesn't matter. Let's just develop a cool AI system and put it in whatever robot that we can get from China, whatever the cheapest one is, and let's just automate tasks, guys. And doesn't matter where, doesn't matter if it looks good or bad, doesn't matter if it's beautiful to our environments and safe for humans. Let's just automate everything. That's not us, right? That's a lot of robotics companies out there that I wouldn't personally be proud of mentioning. But our point is we have to care about safety from the get-go and beauty.
You mentioned money there, and I think there's an interesting point around right now. There seems to be a lot of pressure, even among private companies, the kind of OpenAIs, the Claudes, people like that, where tons of money has been invested. There's clearly strong demand, but there's a question mark around whether their profitability kind of matches their valuation, basically.
How can a company with 13 billion in revenues make 1.4 trillion of spend commitments? And you've heard the criticism,
First
Sam.
of all, we're doing well more revenue than that. Second of all, Brad, if you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer. I just, enough.
For hardware, this has always been an issue for hardware companies in general. If the pressure to become profitable will at some point become a hurdle to cross in scaling, because we know that there's going to be an exponential growth curve in the development of these things, but will there be enough runway to get there?
Right.
Has this been a concern at all, or is this way in the back of the priority list right now?
The business case is so strong. And as a reminder, it took Tesla 18 years to become profitable, right? It took Uber, I think, something like 15 years to become profitable. And Amazon was also something like at least a decade. So some companies take longer to become profitable, but once they do, they take over like huge markets, right? And in the case of AI and robotics as a whole, that's the goal. The goal is to eat some of the losses in the short term so that in the long term, we can aspire to acquire a very, very huge market and to capture a lot of market share. And it's very convenient to say today because it's just sensational. It's cool of a story, right? It's like, oh, these gigantic companies with like so many smart people and great technology are never going to make it. But that is highly unlikely. I think they're going to find a way. And in our case, I think we're just one of a handful of companies really who could make robots like truly a thing in the world. We have the strongest brand by far. People like us the most. So I think we have everything in our favor. Now we just have to like put in the hours and make sure that our product is as good as we said it is for every single person, right? Not just for like a demo or for the first 10, but for hundreds of thousands of people who get Neos.
Please forgive me because I might get some of these names wrong here, and not to focus on negatives. These are just like news stories that have kind of come up in and around Neo. But you recently had the departure of your head of AI, and then you've had a gentleman called Khansari step in his place, and I believe from what research I've done, he seems to be more of the like hands-on builder versus the other gentleman that was more kind of like vision and like the kind of direction of AI. And again, like correct me if that's incorrect, but I'm just curious on, how has that leadership shift changed, and has it changed anything for the trajectory of the company and what you're trying to build?
So I cannot really say much on that.
Okay.
Eric Jang was the previous AI leader, and he did an amazing job. He did, few people in the world could ever dream of achieving what he achieved in such a short amount of time with a very ambitious, with almost like an impossible challenge on his hands. So I'm very thankful that he was able to help us get here. Without him, 1X would not be here. He built essentially the entire US presence of 1X, recruited amazing people, developed the models. And I think he's gonna, he already made history. And I can only, I'm looking forward to see what he does next. But Mohi, he's an awesome leader. What else can I say? But I cannot really disclose much regarding,
Understood.
much else than that. Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to ask was, he mentioned Eric, there's a quote that I think became popular where he talks about 10x more labor, and the idea that like, what does this unlock in terms of economic potential? I think there's a narrative around replacement, but I think the truth is that it's kind of supplementation. It's like, imagine you're working on, I'm just throwing out one of thousands of examples, but like it's a building site and it might have taken 6 months previously, but now we set like an army of robots to go and do that manual labor 24 hours, and these constructions can happen overnight and things like that. What do you think around like this notion? Do you think that that's where it ultimately goes, that we see just this crazy influx in labor?
Yeah, that's ultimately where it will go. I think it will be, so if you think about it, we first interfaced for most of history with the physical world. And then we created this pretty interesting digital world where we have so much flexibility, where we can change the way that we interface with it, where we can change what we see, the spaces in the digital world. We can create, we even created a metaverse in it. And I think what robots are going to unlock is that same level of freedom, but for the physical world. And so now a dreamer, an architect, an artist is not bottlenecked by, contractors or bureaucracy or anything like it, but it's really only constrained by the imagination, the connection with other people that, that artists may have. And so it's really a time for figuring out how to best interface with the physical world. I think that's the coolest part about this. And what that means is costs are going to become like, everything is going to go down like crazy, because producing goods is going to become way cheaper and manufacturing goods is going to become even cheaper than that. And so now if you want to create a really nice sign or a really nice road or a really nice bridge or a house for your parents, now it's going to be way easier to do it properly. Like in the past, I don't know, maybe like 8 decades, art, like creations in general, have become like uglier and uglier, because everybody's trying to like increase margins and save as much money as possible. And now we don't have like beautiful houses anymore, beautiful furniture. Everything is just like a square, because it's easy to manufacture and to pull in together. And the cool thing about robots is that that's not gonna that won't have to be the case anymore. You'll be able to create, interesting things with wilder shapes and concepts. Cost is gonna be one of your concerns, but it's not gonna be the core concern. Today, the problem of creation is that everything goes back to money so much that people think about money more than they think about their creations. And I think that's something that Apple did very well. They thought more about their creations than money, and that's why they created the coolest things out there.
I'm definitely in your side there. I'm just, for the purposes of like a balanced argument, I'm just going to throw the counter out there. So I think there's the question of replacement, especially among jobs, and we're seeing this quite a lot right now. And then there is the old Ford like thing where it was like, we need our workers to be able to afford the car. And I wonder if, like, is there a world where before we get to the abundance of autonomous robots, do people not have jobs such that they can afford the tools that then allows this abundance to happen? And are we just like exacerbating a wealth disparity? I don't know the answer there, but like that's a possible
It gets very complicated, because one of the theories is that there are so many different scenarios, right? One of the scenarios is robots automate everything and then UBI becomes a thing. And then everybody is not forced to work anymore. And in my opinion, humans are not meant to work at companies or factories. That's literally not what we should be doing. I think it would be silly to think that humans were made for the purpose of going to an office and doing something they don't like to get a salary, or going to a factory and doing like just like redundant work many times, or just like trying to replace it, becoming a machine essentially. So I think this new revolution is going to force us to question what humans should actually be doing. And in my opinion, one of the outcomes, which I think it's the one that's going to happen, there are going to be thought leaders that are going to push for and against humanity. The ones that are going to push for humanity are going to say, well, it's time to rethink what we should actually be doing as humans. If robots can take care of labor, or let's call it non-human labor, then those humans should be doing something else. Then what is the purpose of life? That becomes the next question, right? Is it to consume? Is UBI good enough if we just all become consumers? Or is it to discover what the fuck life is about? And I think that's the point of life. And I think working at a factory or an office is rarely how you find out what your life is supposed to be about. I think it's adventure, discovery, serendipity, curiosity, intuition, and those things rarely happen today because we're so strangled by the current system that forces you to work, even if you don't want to work some places. So I think it's going to be liberating, actually.
I love that viewpoint. And I think, yeah, that sounds amazing. Because, I mean, I think you're right. I think a lot of people wrap their identity in their work today, and especially if you're successful in it in some capacity. But I think there's a much larger majority of people that are just doing the 9 to 5 just to get by. And there's a world of discovery and abundance that is possible if we kind of channel all of our efforts in that direction. And I really hope that is how all of this plays out.
Yeah, and just to add on top of that, if you look back at history, most, like, especially modern history, the past 120 years, most philosophers, thought leaders, people who like moved culture, they were upper class. They were aristocrats mostly because they didn't have to work, right? Their families had enough money so that they could just sit around and just think about life a lot. And thanks to their thoughts, we have made a lot of progress in trying to understand what humanity is or what humans are supposed to be doing. So I think philosophy and just like, I guess, human theory is going to evolve dramatically. We'll have to evolve dramatically. And it will not be up to a small elite to decide what the ideas are. But now everybody can contribute with the ideas because we're going to have the internet and people are going to have more time in their hands. And sure, some people are just going to be lazy and probably do nothing with it. But if we increase the number of people that might give us the answers to life in some ways or make life more exciting to live, writers, poets, artists, thinkers, creators, then that's going to be amazing. And sure, some people might miss their jobs at the factory, but I highly doubt that was their life's mission.
That's a fascinating view as well, because in many respects, I actually think like culture today comes bottom up in some respects as well. But historically, I think you're correct. Like it would have been top down. I think like today, a lot of culture kind of comes out of like a desire to get out of a bad situation financially and to like work your way up. If you think about musicians and artists and all the rest of it. And then you think about nations where they have a lot of wealth and like, do they have culture or do they acquire it? You have like a lot of these like oil rich nations or whatever that essentially import their entertainment because there's nobody building the culture. It's an interesting mix there. One thing I will say, and let's just end on this. Right now, I think there's maybe a lot of criticism around the kind of humanoid robot space and the idea that these things will ever be in our homes or that they'll be like readily operational, like in all aspects of our lives. But I think if there's any product statement which is true, it's that anything that can make you richer and potentially lazier is likely to be adopted and grow. And as the exponential curve of AI continues to increase, I think there will be a turning point. And just as vibe coding is a thing today where people can design their own software, I think we'll be able to tap into real world, like humanoid robots and other types of robots and program them as we deem necessary for our own needs. And so I just see this being an amazing space to be in. And in many respects, I'm jealous of like your position being there on the tip of the spear as seeing all this stuff unfold. So any parting words around like where you think this is all going and things you'd like to emphasize?
Yeah, I think the best way to think about the industry and how it's going to bloom is to look at cars. First, you had, Daimler-Benz creating the first diesel engine.
In the mid-1880s, a man called Carl Benz changed the world forever. He had created a machine that would go on to revolutionize the way we travel, live, and work. It would also lead to the creation of one of Germany's most successful and iconic brands. And it would be involved in one of the most important journeys in history. This machine was of course the Benz patent motor wagon, widely considered to be the first car in history.
And then they try to sue a small French manufacturer because they had the patent for a diesel engine. Imagine, they had the patent for 100 years. They could have monopolized the entire space. And then they sued this like small engineer in France. He countersued, and then through discovery, they realized that the guy in France had done it before them. And then the patent became available to everybody. And then suddenly everybody was building cars, diesel engine cars, right? And that created like this entire revolution. Then at some point in the US, you had something like 4,000 car brands. And then it consolidated back into way less than that, maybe like 100 or 50. So I think you're going to see ups and downs. You're going to see fluctuations of excitement, of, capital. There's going to be for sure controversies, with the cars. At some point, it was legal to drive drunk. At some point, you didn't have seatbelts. There were no safety measures for cars, but then there were. And then everybody had a car at home. And then suddenly it wasn't that scary to have one of these like gigantic, like heavy machines that are like tons of like just like metal in your backyard, and they have like a small explosion happening inside of them every single second. And that bloomed into repair shops, custom shops, accessories, lifestyles, because then your car was attached to your brand of cigarettes or your brand of whiskey. And it was attached to what kind of person you were. It was attached to even your identity as a man. It was attached to so many things. And I think with robots, you're going to see cultural shifts. You're going to see market shifts. But the coolest thing about it is that I think if you think deeply enough about it, you can mostly anticipate everything that's going to happen. Some things are sure, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but to some degree, you will know that this industry is going to bloom, and then a couple of things are going to happen. And if you think deeply enough about those, I think a lot of people will be able to find their place in the revolution and make it productive for everybody involved. And then the last thing I want to say before I go is that, dude, I didn't do like this by myself, like at all, right? I mean, obviously we have like a team that's like hundreds of people. Even within the design team, I'm just like a tiny part of it. We have Dark, Kendall, Fen, Stevie, B, Fritz, Wagner, Carson, obviously the the leadership team, Bernd, Jack, Dar again, Ralph for software, Vic for hardware and manufacturing, Mohi for AI, and then so many different characters that come and go whenever we need some support, like Rob, like Dennis, like Case. So really, I'm just here trying to share my thoughts about this, but I will never want to take like the credit away from like the hard work that everybody has been doing so far. This thing is like really like a family. It feels like a family when you're in the office, and we trust each other so much that almost blindly, that when we make a decision, whether it's artistic or market decision, we just go for it. And I think a lot of companies could do much better if they wouldn't, overlace everything with bureaucracy and politics. 1X is a very lean organization, very honest. That also makes it a very challenging organization because the truth is hard. If somebody's not performing, it's obvious because we all know each other, right? If somebody messed up, it's obvious. So you have to be at your best game, but it is a wild ride, and I'm happy to be able to just contribute to it.
Well, I'm sure they'll all appreciate you giving them a shout out. And of course, yeah, it's a team effort, but I think you do a fantastic job of articulating a vision and for being optimistic and to kind of drive people in the direction of positivity and change. So for that, I'm sure they all appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on and for sharing a little bit about the company.
No, appreciate you having me. And this is the first one of many.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. And a quick reminder, if you're interested in any of the research I did for this episode, you can subscribe to the free Substack, which I provided a link to in the description. Again, thank you for watching. Until next time, peace.